Hey everyone, I'm here with Dr. Chris Masterjohn. He earned his Ph.D. in Nutritional Sciences from the University of Connecticut in the summer of 2012. From 2012 to 2014, he did postdoctoral research at the University of Illinois. And from August 2014 to December 2016, he served as an assistant professor of health and nutrition sciences at Brooklyn College, part of the CUNY system. I actually went to Brooklyn College myself. So
Wow.
yeah, I was there up until August 2014. So I just missed you, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. I was taking classes there, some like science classes. I wasn't full time, but so in any case, the reason I have you on here is because, it seems like you really know a lot, and there's a lot of topics I think you would have good commentary on. So I would first like to start off with asking you about your personal diet. And I think that kind of sets the framework of, a lot of the other things that you might talk about so that people get some kind of frame of reference of what you're eating.
Sure. So I have a diet that is my ideal diet, and then I have a diet that I'm actually eating. And I think it would be pretty cool to kind of start with the ideal diet and then explain why I'm deviating from it a little bit. So
I think you're just like the rest of us, by the way.
well, yeah, that's true. So what a good diet is, if you don't have any food intolerances that you're trying to address, you don't have an autoimmune condition or gut condition where you're taking things out because of it, and you're just trying to make sure that you get all your nutrients, is basically going to follow 5 rules. So the first rule is get a half a gram to a gram of protein per pound of body weight a day, and diversify that just like it's an economic portfolio. Diversify it across meat, fish, shellfish, other invertebrates if you want, like crickets or whatever, snails, eggs, and dairy products. And the reason being that each of these has different nutritional profiles. So there's vitamins and minerals that you're getting sort of by accident when you try to get protein from those different sources, and diversifying helps make sure you get them all in. Second rule would be make an effort to eat nose to tail. And so none of us really nose to tail, but ways that are pretty popular of trying to start eating nose to tail, kind of get your feet wet, would be add 4 to 8 ounces of liver to your diet per week. Try replacing some of your muscle meat with heart. Kidney is a little bit more adventurous. So organ meats is one thing, and then bones and other collagen-rich tissues like connective tissues and skin. The most appetizing way to do that would be to simmer them down into soup stock that you can then use as a base for making soups and gravies and things like that. So rule number 1 was diversify across the different animals, and rule number 2 is diversify within the animal to try to consume all its parts. Then rule number 3 would be get the same sort of nutritional portfolio diversified among carbohydrates. So among your carbohydrate foods, legumes, whole grains, starchy tubers, and fruits. If you're going to take something out of there, whole grains would be the best thing to take out. A lot of people have to take out whole grains because of intolerances. But the more you diversify, the more you're kind of spreading your risk and spreading the beneficial aspects of those foods. Rule number 4 would be eat a large volume of vegetables every day. When I say large volume, I'm thinking like several cups. Diversify them across colors. So especially red, orange, yellow, and green are the most important colors. Green is the most important of the 4. At least a cup of that should be dark green vegetables a day. So those 4 rules kind of automatically guarantee that most of your vitamins and minerals needs will be met. The one mineral that I think is really hard to make work in that situation is calcium. And so rule number 5 is to shoot for 3 servings of calcium-rich foods a day. And those could be dairy products with the exception of butter, because the calcium is not in the fat. They could be bones. So edible bones could be like in canned fish. Most canned fish has edible bones. You can check that it has edible bones by looking on the package to see if it gives you about 30% of the daily value of calcium in a serving. If it does, that means it has the bones in, even if you don't notice them. You can also gnaw the ends off of chicken bones, and you can also consume bone meal. And that seems like a supplement when we get it now, because you'd buy a bottle of powdered bone meal. But in fact, bone meal is a traditional food. It's the main way that ancestral populations in the Arctic got their calcium. If they lived on the seacoast, they would dry and pulverize fish bones into fish bone meal. Now, for plant foods, most calcium in most plant foods is not very bioavailable. And in the foods where it is bioavailable, the amount is rather low. There are really only 3 practical plant foods that I think are really good calcium sources. The things that you would find in the supermarket that are practical as plant foods to get calcium from are to get a glass of milk's worth of calcium from Chinese mustard greens would take about 2/3 of a cup to get one of those 3 servings. So one of those 3 servings from Napa cabbage would require 3/4 of a cup, and one of those servings from bok choy would require a little over a cup. Now, if you go down the list, there is a bunch of calcium in a bunch of other foods, but it starts to get really impractical to get them. So, for example, to get all of your calcium's requirement for the day from broccoli and kale would require over 6 cups of those foods combined. So you can do it. It's just, it really starts to get impractical as you go down the list. So that's the 5 rules. And the bonus rule is eat something that is a good digestive aid with every meal. And so that could be ginger, it could be Swedish bitters, it could be lacto fermented vegetables, kombucha, raw apple cider vinegar. Any of those options are really good ways to make sure that you're actually digesting and absorbing the nutrients in your diet. Now, you asked me, what am I eating? So what I'm eating right now is largely a result of the fact that I have some digestive issues. And I know one of the underlying culprits is that I don't absorb fructose very well. And I don't know if that's a genetic issue. It could be hereditary fructose malabsorption, or if it's because of the mix of my microbiome is causing damage in my small intestines that's preventing me from absorbing fructose. Okay, I'll give you an example meal. So like a typical meal for me when I'm not making dinner with my girlfriend or going out to eat is I put white rice at the bottom of the bowl. Then I have a bunch of mixed vegetables that were cooked in an Instapot and saved in the refrigerator as a batch. And I put a bunch of vegetables in. And then for protein, I either have meat or I have eggs. So a lot of the times I'll just put a bunch of meat in and then I'll reheat it, or I'll reheat it without the meat and I'll have 4 hard-boiled eggs on the side. So I'll reheat it and then I'll put in some kind of tomato product, usually salsa, and I'll add a tablespoon of unfortified nutritional yeast, which is where a lot of my B vitamins are coming from. And I'll typically put oyster extract and liver supplements across the day. I do want to move those towards eating whole food oyster and liver, but right now I'm just dealing with so many things with my diet and also other more important things in my business that consume my time. So I'm just kind of packing foods I should be eating that I'm just like taking in capsule form, is the liver and oysters. So that's what most of my meals look like. And then my main fruit is bell peppers. And so I'll just cut up a whole entire bell pepper and I'll alternate the colors of the bell peppers: green, red, yellow, and orange. I don't like the green ones really, but I eat them because the nutrient composition is a little different. So I eat bell peppers because bell peppers are very low FODMAP, especially like the red ones have been shown to be like close to 0 FODMAP. And also they're a very good source of vitamin C. And I think particularly anyone on low carb bell pepper have a really excellent vitamin C to net carb ratio. I'm not on low carb, but I am on low sugar, right? So like strawberries give me fructose malabsorption syndrome, and bell peppers don't. Any natural fruit that is high in carbs is going to be high in fructose, and I basically can't have more than very minimal amounts of fructose. So that's most of my diet. And then I find it very difficult to get all of my calories in on a whole foods diet, like, or I should say on a sort of like healthy whole foods diet. Like if I'm restricting myself to only stuff that I think is good for me, I don't eat enough food and it's bad for me. It screws up my sleep. So I need calorie filler at the end of the day, where I just have something that just tastes good and is extremely calorically dense. After I got my micronutrients and I just top off. And so the 2 foods that I do that with, and this is sort of very much reflecting my digestive limitations, are dried roasted nuts. Cashews are the ones that I seem to tolerate best digestively, or white rice toast, buttered and maybe sweetened with cinnamon. If I sweeten it, it's going to be with dextrose powder. because it doesn't have any fructose in it, unlike sugar or maple syrup or honey. And so, yeah, so my diet is very modified along the lines of providing what my gut tolerates at the moment and also getting my nutrients in. And then, one day a week I cook dinner with my girlfriend, and that is totally dictated by finding a cool recipe that we like. And then a couple times a week I go out to dinner and then I eat whatever.
Okay, so that was a nice, comprehensive, and interesting answer. So I just want to clarify, though, that you wouldn't say that this would be a diet for people necessarily with autoimmune issues or certain other food sensitivities or things like that. Is that
Well,
correct?
that's why, yeah, I mean, that's why I started out saying this is what I think would be ideal for someone who didn't have specific issues that they're trying to fix that require restrictive diets,
Right.
right? Then I'm an example, right? There's things on my list that I'm not eating. The thing you have to realize is that you may benefit from a restrictive diet by taking things out, but that doesn't mean you're not also harming yourself in the long term through nutrient deficiencies if you're not compensating correctly.
Okay, so on that note, my question is, why don't you just do the diet that works best for you and supplement with the nutrients that you're missing? Essentially, that's my approach. That's what I do for myself. So why don't you do that?
Well, I think that is what I do. I think it's highly questionable that a zero vegetable diet is good for anyone in the long term from a microbiome perspective. And so it's not just like, well, I know that I run low in folate when I don't eat dark greens, and I know that I run low in molybdenum when I don't eat legumes. At some point down the line, I'm going to be adding in a supplemental fiber to get the fiber that is needed for gut function that I'm not getting from not eating vegetables.
So why don't
Uh,
you do that? That's actually what I do. I add
Well,
in
I well I
fiber.
well I would, but vegetable fiber is one of the most well tolerated fibers that I have.
Oh, I
So,
see. So
so
I consume high maize, which is a resistant starch. It's pretty purified. It's 60% resistant starch. And then I consume psyllium husk. And I find that I have no immune reactions to those fibers. So one is the soluble fiber, that's the resistant starch, and the psyllium husk has insoluble fiber.
psyllium husk works like a miracle drug for me. Um, all soluble fibers are profoundly evil to me.
But the thing is that that
I've
might
I've never
change if you're excluding all soluble fibers already, right? So if you're eating a lot of
yeah.
vegetables and then you also include soluble fiber, which is what I've done in the past, then I'll have gut issues. Like I'll just have gas, right? There's just too much fiber going on for me. But if you exclude the fibers and you just have the soluble fiber from the, let's say, high maize resistant starch, and then you have the psyllium husk, I find that I have absolutely no issues.
What's the one you're using? Would you call
It's
it?
high maize resistant starch fiber.
What is high? Is it high maize means
It's
it
just
has a lot
a
of corn?
brand. It's a brand.
What is
It's
it made out
great.
of?
It's purified from corn, but I don't do well with grains. I don't do
So
well with
can
corn.
tell you for a fact that soluble corn fiber is the worst.
No, but I would try it just because
Okay. Yeah, I haven't tried that. So
yeah, just because I do very poorly with corn and I do poorly with grains, and this is highly purified. So it's 60%. You don't get any of the irritants. And I think a lot of the issues with FODMAP is not only the FODMAPs or the fructooligosaccharides, whatever, disaccharides. It's they seem to also contain irritants for the gut that synergize, if you will, negatively with the fiber that then cause gut problems, autoimmune type issues, and whatnot. And so I think when people go on low FODMAP, there's they're excluding the fiber, which is can be an issue, right? And they're also excluding components of the foods that are found in the fibers. They just go together with the fibers for some reasons, and that those could be the anti-nutrients, the lectins, whatever it is. But
yeah, I'd be willing to try that. And so I'll put it on my list of things to try. But I mean, right now I essentially am doing what you were saying. So like, I do try to get my nutrients from whole foods first, but I'm putting in the whole foods that don't uh, bother my gut, and then I'm supplementing the things that don't fit within that.
yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with me is, I used to fart all the time, and that might it was just like all day I would fart, like every day. And I live with my girlfriend. I've been living with her for more than a year. She's like, I've never seen you fart, right? Um, and the only time I would is when I actually completely stray from the diet, and then I start, doing things that I was doing in the past, and then maybe my gut will act up. But I essentially went from like farting all the time to never farting, and so that was, and again, the only way I could do that is by taking out all the grains, all the legumes,
Mm.
and then I don't even consume a whole bunch of vegetables. I consume some, right? So I'm not a carnivore, and the reason I consume some is because I'm hedging my bets. I do think that vegetables are healthy. They contain certain nutrients, and they contain fibers. And I think even though I take some fibers, I still think more is better. And as long as I'm just doing it, some vegetables, some supplemented fiber, it seems like it doesn't cause any issues, and I function fine. But yeah, so let's move on a bit. So far, it's very interesting. You eat liver and oysters. One thing I want to ask you about that is, you know, liver. A lot of toxins are stored in the liver. Number one, and I know you're gonna say like, yeah, you should get clean, whatever.
No,
Grass
I'm
fed.
gonna no, I'm gonna say no, they're not.
Okay. Okay, you're just going to say the toxins are not found in the liver. Okay, fine. The other question is with oysters. So oysters, I found out about 6 months ago that they purify 50 gallons of water a day. Now, I haven't seen, when I look at the studies on the level of toxins in oysters, it doesn't seem so bad. I mean, it all depends on where you're getting it from, but just hearing that number, 50 gallons of water a day from a single oyster, like I have to believe there's some toxins in there. But yeah, so what's your take on liver and oysters?
Well, I'll start with the liver. So, and in fact, I have a post about this called "The Liver is Not a Filter." The liver's job with respect to toxins is to get rid of them. So the liver has a three-phase process of processing a toxin to tag it for removal from the body. And the end stage of what the liver does is for that toxin to wind up in your feces or your urine. Phase one is oxidation. Phase one can actually make something more toxic. It's just a preparation phase for phase two. Phase two is called conjugation. Glucuronidation is one example of conjugation. Conjugation in general means to attach one thing to another, to conjugate something to something. And so you conjugate the toxin to glucuronic acid, that's glucuronidation, but you could also methylate it, you could also glycinate it, you could also glutathionate it. There are many different ways of conjugating something in phase two. And then phase three is to export this thing into the bile. The bile brings it back into the intestines. And from the intestines, the conjugated toxin, now remember, it's not the original toxin, it's the conjugated toxin. Conjugation makes it less toxic, so it neutralizes it metabolically, and it also makes it more water soluble. And so from the intestine, it will either not get absorbed and go into the feces, or it'll get absorbed, and from the bloodstream, it'll go into the urine. So the liver is not designed at all to retain toxins. Now the question is, does the liver retain toxins? Well, all tissues have toxins, and yeah, you will find that liver can have toxins in it. But I actually researched this maybe 15 years ago or so, very intensively with respect to dioxin and dioxin-like compounds, which is a big subset of toxins. And it is never the case that liver is much higher than all the other foods. And it is usually the case that many other foods are way higher than liver. The liver is not uniquely high in toxins because the liver's job is not to filter toxins like a car filter filters oil, or like your air filter in your home filters your air and you have to throw the filter out. Many people will say the liver filters toxins. I think that language shouldn't be used at all, because what the liver does is it modifies toxins and sets them up for leaving the body. For that reason, there's not any disproportionate, unusually high amount of toxins in liver. despite the fact that there are toxins in liver and there's toxins in everything else. On oysters, I haven't done as much research, and I do need to research that more, but I have been passing papers back and forth with a couple people, and it looks exactly the way you described it. Oysters are not high in toxins, but they are capable of filtering a lot of water. I mean,
It
that's
just
what you
seems
said.
like a contradiction, though. It seems like
No,
a
it's not a contradiction at all.
it seems like it. Not that it is, but I'm just saying, like, I guess it has a
Well,
way of
because
excreting those toxins.
exactly, yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It
Okay.
does. So the end result is, are the oysters high in toxins? A study of their ability to filter water is an utterly useless metric. That study is telling you part of the mechanism. Studying a mechanism can tell you two things. It can tell you why something happens, or it can let you hypothesize that something might happen. But studying mechanism doesn't tell you that something does happen, right? So studying the filtering rate of an oyster on some water or the egress rate of an oyster, those are mechanistic studies that can either let you hypothesize maybe oysters in their natural environment as harvested for food are high in toxins, or maybe they're not. You test that. Mechanistically, you can show that oysters remove toxins from water, but you can't show that the oysters being raised for food are high in those toxins.
Right. Excellent. Okay. So completely in agreement on oysters and liver. I studied the 3 phases of liver detoxification, and I knew that it's more of a detoxification. I guess sometimes in this case, I let some bad ideas from, from the environment creep in. And it was just kind of like this association. Yeah, probably the liver does store toxins, but I agree with you. Probably. I never looked at the actual toxins in liver. And since you looked at that and you're saying it's not right on there for debunking the myth.
So I beg everyone right now to Google "the liver is not a filter." And what you will find as the top result is a post I made. Repeat after me, "the liver is not a filter." And the image that goes with this post is of a little girl with a backpack on who's being punished and forced to write on a chalkboard at school, "The liver is not a filter, the liver is not a filter, the liver is not a filter, the liver is not a filter," over and over again. And it's a very short post that explains the 3 phases of liver detoxification at 3 levels. So level 1 is for everyone. Level 2 of explaining this is for the curious. Level 3 is for the academics in the audience. You look, I'm marketing this as a global campaign to shut down the misuse of the term filter as applied to the liver, because the liver is not a filter.
Completely agree there. Thanks for that. Okay. Moving on to the carnivore diet. And so I want to get your take on the carnivore diet. I just spoke to Paul Saladino, and one thing he said that I obviously don't agree with, he was saying there's no evidence that vegetables are healthy. He says that, there were 5 interventional trials with vegetables and they all failed. Meaning there was no positive outcome from these trials. And I asked him, but are there more trials, or are you just, data mining and getting the 5 trials that didn't have any success? And he said, no, those were all the trials. And then the other thing he said was that, all these studies are done from epidemiological studies, and there's a healthy user bias in these studies that they can't fully control for. So these epidemiological studies are useless, right? And so his whole hypothesis that vegetables and definitely grains and beans and fruits he doesn't believe they're healthy because, there's just no evidence to say that they're healthy. So I want to get your take on that. And there's a lot to unpack there.
I think, yeah, I mean, the 30,000-foot view is that's extremely selective reasoning.
Okay.
I mean, so like basically the assumption there is that we need large scale randomized controlled trials showing that vegetables have some kind of clinical endpoint over the course of, however long it takes to get the diseases that we want to study. I don't think we have a convincing batch of large scale, long-term randomized controlled trials showing that increasing vegetables in the diet has major risk reduction on clinical disease endpoints. But we definitely don't have that for removing vegetables from the diet, or for the carnivore diet, or for increasing meat in the diet. And so it's sort of like, if that's the bar, there's not that much that you can say about whole foods at all, in which case it's sort of like, completely paralyzing. So to make it an argument for removing vegetables, I think just requires being very one-sided in how you apply your skepticism to the existing evidence.
The thing is, so his argument is that epidemiological studies basically have very little utility because they can't adjust for healthy user bias enough. What would you say to that?
I think that is a correct limitation of observational data. But first of all, every type of evidence has its strengths and limitations, and you have to acknowledge those strengths and limitations when you look at an entire set of data. So, for example, one of the strengths of a randomized controlled trial is that by randomizing, you account for all of the unknown confounding variables. So observational studies have the strength that you have these massively long exposure times that effectively replicate the exposure times of the diseases you're trying to study, and people are consuming the diets in the context that they naturally choose to do so, and in the context that they will do so if you tell people to do that thing. Right? If you go tell people to eat 6 cups of vegetables a day, they're more likely to do it in the way that people are eating 6 cups of vegetables a day now than in the way that you would do it if you forced them to do it one way in a randomized controlled trial. So look, I'm not saying that these things all have equal weight. I'm saying you have to acknowledge strengths and limitations, and you have to admit it when there is no evidence to answer your question, right? I want to make very clear what I'm not saying. So there's a lot of people who grossly exaggerate the value of observational data by saying that we can't do an RCT about X. Therefore, we have to rely on the observational data about X, and we have to treat that with the same confidence that we would treat an RCT on some drug where we would do the RCT. Like, that's complete BS, right? So if you can't do an RCT to answer a question and you have to rely on observational data, that doesn't eliminate the limitations of observational data. It doesn't eliminate his critique of the healthy user bias. That's true. People self-selecting a diet means that you don't know whether the effect of that diet is an effect of the diet or it's an effect of some underlying thing that caused them to choose the diet and to also do some other thing that is impacting their health. So sometimes you just don't have an answer to something, and you have to fall back on what you do, and you have to acknowledge what the limitations of the evidence is. And I think in the case of vegetables, we do have observational data that is, I would argue, very consistent that people who eat more vegetables have better health outcomes. We do have lots of experimental data on components and mechanisms of the vegetables. So like one reason I think it's sort of really silly to make that argument that like there's no RCTs of vegetables so we don't have to eat them is that there's a bunch of things in vegetables where we have very good mechanistic evidence on their necessity. So like a lot of people who are on carnivore, you know, they're like, well, I was on carnivore for a year and I didn't get scurvy, so I must be getting enough vitamin C. Vitamin C is a great example where there's very strong correspondence between the amount of vitamin C that you can show experimentally maximizes antioxidant protection and immune function, and the plasma level of vitamin C that is observationally associated with the lowest risk of cardiovascular disease and a handful of vitamin C related cancers. If all that stuff aligns to say that 100 to 150 milligrams of vitamin C produces the plasma level that is shown in RCTs to maximize antioxidant defense and immune function, and also happens to be the plasma level of vitamin C where the risk of cardiovascular disease and certain cancers bottoms out, and also happens to be the amount of vitamin C that you would get from 5 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, that also happens to be correlated with observational data with the lowest disease risk. Like, you can't dismiss all that by saying no one has shown that oranges in a randomized controlled trial will lower the risk of heart disease. You see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
there's
that's a
too
great
much,
response.
too much alignment to like pick the thing that you didn't observe and just say that.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, first of all, there's animal mechanistic studies with individual components in fruits and vegetables. I mean, there's a whole bunch of polyphenols that they've done mechanistic animal studies on. And then you have the epidemiological studies, but then you also have serum studies, like the levels in the serum, and other kinds of studies that go towards a point of view that, let's say, vegetables are healthy, even if you don't have like a 10-year trial of X, Y, and Z vegetables having a positive health outcome, usually because these long-term trials are too expensive. I actually brought up the example with vitamin C, and it's a reasonable response where he was saying they did studies on vitamin C supplements, and there's been no evidence to show that vitamin C supplements have any kind of health impact, right? And the other thing is he's saying, like, it could be, let's say, the people who have higher levels of serum vitamin C, they are eating more fruits and vegetables, but that's getting back to the underlying issue, the healthy user bias. So, right, these people who are eating more fruits and vegetables, they have better health outcomes, but they also have higher levels of serum vitamin C. And then there's some underlying healthy user bias. But in actuality, when people take vitamin C, there's no improvement in health outcomes.
I mean, first of all, it's not true that all of the studies on vitamin C supplementation are negative. There are some positive studies with vitamin C supplementation, but I think the more important point is that the amount of vitamin C that is likely to be optimal is way lower than what people are supplementing with in high doses and in most cases of supplementation, and yet is very much higher than what the average person eating the standard American diet is eating, and exceedingly higher than what's on a carnivore diet. When you move from like 20 milligrams a day to 60 milligrams a day, you're getting a huge benefit. And that when you move from 60 milligrams a day to 90 milligrams a day, you're getting a significant but smaller benefit. And that when you move from 90 to 120, you're getting like a marginal 10% more benefit. And 120 to 150, you're getting like a marginal 5% benefit. Like taking a random sample of people and supplementing 2 grams a day and trying to show some effect on whatever is likely to wash out where the effect really lies. Like, I think a lot of the studies have weaknesses from not addressing the people who have poor vitamin C status and moving them into optimal vitamin C status, which is where you're really going to see the biggest results. A lot of the studies have been done on kind of on the theory of that Linus Pauling developed, that we all need like grams of vitamin C a day because we lost the ability to synthesize it as we evolved into our primate lineage. I think that idea is probably wrong, but that doesn't negate that when you're moving between a carnivore diet and a standard omnivore diet and a fruit and vegetable rich diet, that those differences in vitamin C, if you're not supplementing, are meaningful. And a lot of people might already be taking smaller dose supplements where those effects are kind of washed out. But I think, you know, to say that you can then consume like a 15 milligram a day vitamin C diet, which is probably what you're getting from a really well-designed combination of fresh meats, especially if you include some organ meats, you know, to say that doing that indefinitely, that you can just like have your plasma level of vitamin C bottom out and not meaningfully detract from your ability to defend against oxidative stress and have a well-functioning immune system. I mean, like, technically you can like make an argument that we don't know enough to say that he's not right, that that's doable, but that's a really big gamble to take.
Well said, well said. He was making the argument that I think like 20 milligrams is more than enough.
I mean, it's enough to prevent scurvy, but
So that's actually what I want to talk about, because that's what his argument was. And my take is that, you know, we're not just trying to prevent scurvy here, right? That vitamin C has other roles than just preventing scurvy.
the RDA has nothing to do with preventing scurvy. That's why
Yes,
it's
tell us
higher.
more about that. Like the RDA, I think, is about 60 milligrams a day for most people, right?
It's 60 for adult women and 90 for adult men.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that it was 90 for adult men. Okay. So, yeah, you're not getting 90
I think,
milligrams a day from a carnivore diet. Even if you eat
yeah, you're an average person's not getting 90 milligrams from an unsupplemented standard American diet either.
So, my question is, how are they getting that RDA, and how good do you think that RDA is? Right? Would you even push the RDA up? Maybe push it
I
down?
push it up.
You would push it up. So how are they getting this RDA?
So it goes back to what I was saying before. What they did was they looked at the observational data of vitamin C, diseases that are correlated with plasma vitamin C levels and vitamin C intakes from foods. And they looked at the alignment of that with short-term experimental data on functional aspects of vitamin C metabolism. So one of the main markers was how much benefit can you get to markers of immune function and antioxidant status without extra vitamin C spilling into the urine. The RDA is basically set at the point at which you get 80% of that benefit without loss of vitamin C in the urine. I would push the RDA up because I think it's completely irrational to put excretion of vitamin C on the urine, which has no negative consequence at all, as a cap on the benefit that you would extract from the vitamin C. So their data actually showed that maximal benefit is around 100 to 150 milligrams a day. And they sort of said, because you get most of that benefit from 60 to 90 milligrams a day, depending on body weight and sex as they adjusted it, because you get most of that benefit from the RDA, it's somehow of a value to not waste vitamin C in the urine to get the additional 10 or 20% benefit. That strikes me as completely irrational. I don't know why anyone would give a crap if the vitamin C is going into their urine. So on the basis of the data that's reviewed in the RDA report, I would make the RDA 100 to 150.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, to me, it doesn't either make sense. So the RDA is basically like, okay, this is the level that, you're getting most of the benefit from vitamin C, maybe, 90%, whatever the benefit is. But I would say, like, for people who want optimal levels, like you're saying, if you're getting 150, then you're probably getting the optimal level at that point.
Yeah, definitely most of the benefit to most people is going to come in that 100 to 150 milligram range.
What do you think about the argument that carnivores need less vitamin C for various reasons, such as they're consuming collagen? So vitamin C creates collagen, and also because it's usually like theoretical arguments like, well, it's on this diet, you need this level of vitamin C, but carnivores, they don't need as much, right? Because they're not consuming carbs or grains or whatever. I don't know exactly what the arguments. I know collagen is one of them. What do you think about that?
I think those are reasonable hypotheses to make to study, but I think they're ridiculous bases for ignoring huge volumes of evidence on nutritional requirements. I mean, basically, context always matters, right? So there are as many contextual variables that might affect the vitamin C requirement as you can imagine, most of which are not studied. And so why would you bias your selection of contextual variables that are not studied that might matter to the ones that just are the ones that justify you consuming less on your diet?
Right.
To take carbohydrate as an example, one of the arguments around carbohydrate and vitamin C is that vitamin C can use certain glucose transporters for transport. And so pro-carbohydrate advocates will point out that if you don't have an insulin response from carbohydrates, you're not going to have as many glucose transporters in the membranes of some of your cells. That's mainly muscle and adipose tissue, and you're not going to get vitamin C into them as well. And then other people will say, well, the glucose is going to compete for absorption with those glucose transporters. Either of those are reasonable hypotheses, but no one has ever done a test on how carbohydrate intake affects vitamin C requirements. You could do one, but no one's done it. I think this is going out on a limb a little bit, but I think it could be the case. I would be interested to see a study of whether it was the case that consuming collagen decreased your vitamin C requirement. Like, it's very easy for that not to be the case because, first of all, vitamin C is not used in making collagen. It's used in strengthening collagen in context. So it's like literally the cross-linking that occurs between the collagen molecules that are already formed in the location of the collagen-rich tissue. That's where vitamin C is needed. And that collagen is constantly turning over. It's maybe true, but not at all clear that consuming collagen is going to get around that need for that. In fact, it's probably not true because you're not going to absorb the collagen cross-linked together. You're going to absorb it broken down into like dipeptides or maybe some tripeptides or something, and then free amino acids. So anyway, there are these contextual factors, but like I could, maybe people with PhDs in nutrition need less vitamin C. Like maybe, you know what I mean? Like if I want to, maybe people on low FODMAP need less vitamin C. Like,
Right. I
maybe
mean, if I were to sum up the argument, it's like, it's a reasonable hypothesis that people on a carnivore diet need less vitamin C, but it's almost equally as reasonable that people on a carnivore diet need more vitamin C.
it strikes me as like a stunning lack of self-awareness, not for someone like that to see that what they are doing is they're inventing hypotheses out of thin air to justify their behavior.
Exactly. I agree.
And I just want to point out one more point, which is that literally no population on the entire face of the earth for all of human history ever consumed a carnivore diet. And I mean, to the best of anyone's knowledge. And I've talked to people who massively conflate eating a high animal product diet with a carnivore diet. A high animal product diet is not a carnivore diet. All you have to do is eat one vegetable for that not to be a carnivore diet. and like when Weston Price, who is a pioneer of nutritional anthropology, studied the natives of the Arctic, he asked them how they got, like what they did about scurvy. And they said that they didn't get scurvy. Scurvy was a white man's disease. And it was a white man's disease because the Indians knew how to prevent scurvy and the white man didn't, but the white man was too self-confident to ask the Indians how to prevent it. And so he said, how do you prevent it? And they went back and asked the chief if they could tell him. Went back and asked the chief, and the chief said that because Weston Price was telling them not to eat the food in the white man's store, that they were allowed to tell him. So they said what they do to prevent scurvy is they kill a moose, and they take out the kidney of the moose, and there's a little ball of fat on the top of the kidney, and they take that out and they cut it into little pieces. And every little Indian and every big Indian in the tribe gets one little slice of the big ball of fat, a little ball of fat on top of the kidney. And that's how they prevent scurvy. That little ball of fat on top of the kidney is not a ball of fat. That's the adrenal gland. And adrenal glands and pituitary glands are by far and away the richest sources of vitamin C. Adrenal glands bigger than the pituitary gland. There's two of them. So you kill a moose, the overwhelming source of vitamin C is the adrenal gland. Tell me why those natives of the Arctic knew what scurvy was, why they knew that they get scurvy when they eat nothing but meat, but don't get scurvy when they add to that a little slice of adrenal gland.
And they were eating the cleanest meat possible, right?
Yes, exactly. So and they were eating nose to tail, like, otherwise, right? So they were using the bones, right? Like they were eating the collagen, right?
Exactly.
And so this goes back to a point before about length of time of exposure and observational studies. You could sort of look at this and be like, well, that's really confounded. Like there was no, everyone was doing the same thing in the tribe. Like they're just telling a story or whatever. But they also, you're looking at exposure time of entire lifetimes for these people, all doing the same thing for a whole lifetime. And you're also looking at them never having been raised on like total cereal and like vitamin C fortified orange juice substitute and stuff like that, right? So like these carnivore diets, people have eaten like crazy amounts of vitamin C by the time they go on a carnivore diet. It's like the carnivore diet is not zero vitamin C. It's probably got like 15 milligrams of vitamin C a day in it. And it's going to take a very long time on even a small amount of vitamin C to deplete it compared to growing up on it, right? And so...
And most people even cheat. Like all these people who are saying they do it, I think most of them are not, they're not actually doing it all the time. They do it 5 days a week, right? Or they do it... They do it on, they don't do it on the weekend, or they do it in the morning. I mean, there are some people who do it legit, but I'm just saying like a lot of people who are saying they're doing it are not doing it fully.
There was a British study a while back that showed that 30% of vegans eat chicken.
Exactly. That succinctly demonstrates exactly what I said. But in any case, I just want to make it clear that if there's anyone knows about what ancestral people were eating at any time in history, I mean, you're one of the people who have done a lot of research on this. And that's important because a lot of people in the carnivore community are trying to make arguments that this is, what our ancestors ate, or this is what we're supposed to be eating. And it kind of takes on a religious tone. And I really don't think that that's true. And Chris Masterjohn is, he's an expert, I'd say, on this subject. And he's saying that this is completely not true. Is that
Yeah,
correct? Yeah.
that's definitely not true. And I mean, I'll just point out, to be clear, I'm not anti-carnivore, and I don't deny the positive experiences people have in the carnivore diet. I'm not arguing that carnivore shouldn't be a tool in the kit of someone, but the fact that you benefited from, the fact that your autoimmune condition went away by eating carnivore doesn't mean that this is the ancestral human diet. I mean,
Exactly.
get real here. There's your experience, and then there's reality, right? Like I mean, I'm not saying your experience isn't part of reality. Everyone's experience is part of reality, but reality is bigger than your experience. And the fact that you benefit from something doesn't mean that like that's the diet that like everyone should be eating and everyone was eating before our knowledge of diet got corrupted by, grains or whatever. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, and actually, I'm a candidate who actually has done really well on a carnivore type diet, right? I call it something else, a lectin avoidance diet, but essentially, it's very similar to a carnivore diet. It's just not as dogmatic. It's essentially like use a carnivore diet as an elimination diet, and then expand into other foods, right? And if you are doing best on a carnivore diet, in that case, supplement. So I supplement with, I make sure I do my research. I make sure every nutrient I'm missing in, that I'm supplementing with. I don't just, buy the theory that, oh, this is what we were always supposed to be eating. I only need 10 milligrams of vitamin C. Oh, it's the RDAs are all irrelevant. And, on my carnivore diet, everything is going to be perfect for me. Right. So
yeah, and I, if if right now your autoimmune condition is 5 times more of a problem than any mediocre borderline nutrient deficiency, 10 years on a carnivore diet later, that might not be the case anymore, right? So you may get tremendous benefit from it now. But look, if you do that with the consciousness that you're deviating from ideal nutritional requirements, that gives you an important tool to monitor the effect of the diet, things that you should be looking at over time, possible consequences, possible transitions you might want to make after you recover from the most important parts of it. I think I probably would be, the ideal diet for me might be a carnivore diet plus psyllium husk, dextrose powder, and some supplements. It might be,
it worked for me. I mean, basically meat, chicken, seafood. Oysters are fine. Liver's fine. Like any kind of meat-based products, animal-based products. And then I just take everything I'm missing. And on the weekend, I stray a bit. I'll eat a bit of fruit. And that's mainly because I'm exercising a lot. And my immune system, goes down. Number one is it gets lowered overall. And also it gets more distributed. Like let's say if I'm growing muscle, my immune system has to work on that. So the inflammation is going throughout my body. It's not, I don't necessarily feel it in the places that I would normally feel it, such as, I'll get some kinds of neuroinflammation, or if like my joints or other areas, gut. So I find that after exercise, my tolerance goes up, but I will make sure to do it at the right time. And the other thing is if I stray from something, I'll take very specific anti-inflammatory supplements that will reduce the sensitivities from food. But otherwise, I keep to it pretty well. Like I do eat vegetables sometimes, like again, because I'm trying to hedge my bets. So I'm not dogmatic. I will eat vegetables, but I try to limit it to leafy green vegetables, maybe cauliflower, things like that I don't notice any significant negative effect from. Whereas I'll stay away from the grains, the beans, and nuts, and and if I do consume it, it's in very small quantities. So I'm not dogmatic about it. It's like, okay, I'll eat some seeds, but I won't have a whole meal of seeds or a whole meal of nuts. It'll be like, all right, I'll take a couple nuts, whatever, not a big deal, right? And so these are sensitivities. They're not allergies. So when it comes to sensitivities, having a small amount often is not so bad. It's having a large amount that I find having problems from. So like you said, when you're on the low FODMAP diet, if you eat a bit of FODMAP here and there, it's not the end of the world for you. But if you just have a lot of a FODMAP food, all of a sudden you'll get problems.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, this was great. It's been very, very informative, and I really appreciate that. I want you to tell the user and the listeners how they can find more about you and any kind of products that they can learn more about the things that we've been talking about. Yeah, so.
Cool. I'm at chrismasterjohnphd.com. That's my website where everything goes. At Chris Masterjohn, spelled just like my name, on all the social media, mainly on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, tiny bit on Snapchat here and there. I have 2 products that I'm excited about right now. The first is the free class called Vitamins and Minerals 101. It comes as a daily message from email or Facebook Messenger. There are 21 lessons that are completed, and there's another 9 lessons on the way. So if you sign up now, you'll get them once a day right up until the point that I'm still making the lesson. Then they'll come out once a week. A lot of people are probably going to be listening to this when it's all done. And so for you, just be a lesson a day. It's designed really for the beginner who's curious about nutrition and doesn't have any background, but I'm finding that a lot of people who are experts are loving it because either each like 10-minute lesson is a great refresher, or there was a nugget of something that they didn't know. And it was like, wow, holy crap, that one thing that I didn't know in that 10-minute lesson is game changing. So it really is for everyone that has any curiosity about nutrition. And the second thing that I'm excited to share is a digital resource I have called Testing Nutritional Status, the Ultimate Cheat Sheet. And that is a comprehensive system for managing nutritional status. It helps you determine what resources you have financially and time-wise, and what, given those resources, what's the best way for you to collect data to help you determine what nutrients you might be missing and what you have too much of. It combines lab testing with signs and symptoms, with dietary analysis, and kind of holds your hand through developing an action plan and making sure that action plan is effective. That costs $30. I'll give your audience a 20% discount on it. Links to any of these things we can put in the show notes so people can easily access them.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. And if there's going to be a nutrition course that my listeners are going to buy, Chris, as he demonstrated in this podcast, he really does know his stuff, and I can tell he knows his stuff. So I'm assuming those courses are going to be really good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, and hopefully I can get you on again because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Great. So,
Cool, man. Thank you.
yeah, my pleasure. Have a great day.
You too.